Okay, so we have a doozy of a lesson today. Are you guys ready? Okay, just a reminder, because this is supposed to be in the back of the minds of the readers of Genesis 47, going back to ancient times, is we have this plot cycle of sin, consequences of the sin, and then redemption in this subplot of Genesis relating to Hagar. And what does her name mean? Immigrant or sojourner, wanderer, right? Hagar, it's going to be very important in this lesson. And she is from Egypt. She was part of the get out of here, I'll pay you whatever you need kind of bribe from Pharaoh to Abraham, because Abraham had deceived Pharaoh. A plague was upon the people of Egypt because Pharaoh didn't know that Sarah was Abraham's wife and took her into his harem, so to speak, and God punished Egypt because of it. So he's like, here, take all this money, take all these goods, take all these livestock, and take these slaves. And one of those slaves was Hagar, the wanderer. And so as Sarah gets older and older, and they remain childless, they have no children. So Sarah gets a great idea. What if you go into my slave and have a child by her, and it'll be mine? And Abraham's like, okay. Who has no say in this, according, at least in the text? Hagar. Yeah, she's a slave. And so she has this baby, and Sarah begins to see, she is not looking at me like her mistress anymore. She's kind of looking down on me because she has a baby that I couldn't. And so she mistreats Hagar, and Hagar runs away. Yahweh intervenes, sends her back. Sarah does eventually get pregnant with the promised child, but the subplot of Hagar continues because when Hagar's boy and Sarah's boy are playing one day, Sarah just kind of has a conniption, and she tells Abraham, here's what you got to do. You got to get rid of these two, just send them off into the wilderness. And that's a death sentence. It's a death sentence. One which Abraham was furious about this command. The Lord says, you know what? I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to make Ishmael, this child by Hagar, a great nation, and I'm going to save them from death. And he does, and he does make them into a great nation. Well, lo and behold, just like Exodus chapter 34 verses 6 and 7 says, how the sins of the fathers will be visited upon the children to the fourth generation. Here's the fourth generation, Joseph, and he has a falling out with his brothers. And his brothers throw him into a pit. And who happens to be wandering by is some Ishmaelites. And the Ishmaelites buy him and take him where? To Egypt. I mean, this is not a coincidence that the biblical authors are pointing out the irony in the events and writing about them very specifically in this way. So here Joseph is. He goes into these three pits that we've already talked about, the pit of slavery, well, first the literal pit, and then a pit of slavery, and then the pit of the dungeon. So these three ways that he's enslaved. And finally, because of the interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams, he comes out very much on top. The second most powerful man in Egypt, and the way the text reads, he's basically ruling Egypt. He comes up with all the plans to save everyone from the famine by storing up 7 years worth of grain, is able through various machinations that we've already discussed, able to save his family, reveal himself as their brother, reconcile with his family, and now what? Pharaoh has already promised that if the family comes down to Egypt, he will provide them with this beautiful, lush land that looks a lot like the word garden in Hebrew, gan, except it's Goshen, so there's one letter in between. And it's like a Garden of Eden land. It's like, wow, anything they could ever want, they can bring their flocks and their sheep and all their animals, their family, and prosper there. So will the cycle repeat is the question. Is that it for this whole enslavement, oppression, pit, and then, the oppressor gets oppressed, and that whole cycle? Is this it? Is this the end? We're going to see. Verse 1, then Joseph went in and told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers and their flocks and their herds, all that they have come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. So they've now moved, okay? They packed their bags, moved to, it's interesting, we have luggage behind me. They did, packed all their luggage, and they moved to Goshen. So that's where they are right now. And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh. So I think the question is not, why did he take 5? I mean, that is an interesting question. But I think the more interesting question is, why would the biblical authors, why would the Moses team have any interest in telling us that he picked 5 specifically? They're perfectly capable, and sometimes do just say he took some of his brothers. Usually, almost always, when the biblical authors are specific about something, there's a reason for it. So I think this is at least one of the reasons. Sometimes there's more than one reason. I think this is one of them. So 5, the number 5. The number 5 doesn't just mean one thing. There's a range of meaning symbolically for 5. It's just how, it's like 7 doesn't just mean one thing. There's a range of things. But one of the things that 5 is connected to, okay, so let me ask you this. And you don't have to answer out loud because I'm hoping you get it wrong, so just answer it in your head. Can you think of the very first time in the Bible, first time, that the Lord blessed anyone? You gotta go way back. Okay, if some of you might have thought, well, yeah, he blessed with kind of a command to the humans on day 6, be fruitful and multiply, right? That wasn't the first time. That was the second time. The first time was on day 5 to the sea swimmers and the sky flyers. Day 5. So 5, among other things, there's other things this is connected to blessing. And I think one of the things that the biblical authors are trying to communicate here is that the family of Israel, family of Jacob, has been significantly blessed. Be blessed in the way that they can be fruitful and multiply. And what happens over the next 400 years or so? They multiply big time. Between the end of Genesis and the beginning of Exodus, there's a lot more descendants of Jacob, a lot more. So I do think that that's a literary cue there. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph's brothers, what is your ma'aseh, your occupation? And Joseph had prepared the brothers for this last week, if you remember. He said, Pharaoh asks, what do you do? This is what I want you to tell him that you do. Ma'aseh. So they said to Pharaoh, well, your servants, meaning themselves, are shepherds, both we and our fathers. They also said to Pharaoh, okay, remember why Joseph said to say that? Because the Egyptians looked down on shepherds. And so Joseph is like, if you say this, they'll leave you alone and you won't have to integrate, with Egyptian society, because they'll be like, ew, shepherds. You guys can stay in this distant land. There could be historical reasons for this, including an uprising many years before this of a group called the Hyksos in Egypt that were like shepherd kings, and the Egyptians still had a lot of PTSD from that. That is one theory, at any rate. But the idea is they look down on shepherds. So Pharaoh, they said to Pharaoh, we're shepherds. And they also said to him, we have come to reside in the land. Guess what that Hebrew word for reside is? It's the same root word of Hagar. So who are the immigrants now? The aliens, the ones who are wandering. And of course they are, because they were promised the land of Canaan, or at least a certain part of the land of Canaan at that point through Abraham. So yeah, they're wandering from that promised land, but it's actually more complex than that, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So we have come to Gur, or reside in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, for the famine is severe up in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please let your servants Yashav live in the land of Goshen. This word Yashav doesn't just mean exist, doesn't just mean carry out our lives and so forth. It means settle in a sense. But what's interesting is that the first time that word is used in the Bible is Genesis chapter 4, verse 16. The first time it's used of Cain, when Cain went to Yashav in the land of Nod, in the land of wandering. So in the reader's mind, it's like, wow, that's strange. They're doing the same thing they're not Cain, are they? I mean, they're not. But Cain yashaving in the land of wandering, and the wanderers now yashaving in the land of Goshen, it's a little tension here. And I think we're supposed to feel that tension. We're supposed to ask ourselves, is this good life in Goshen really something that, is it really long-term going to be good for them? So, verse 5. Pharaoh said to Joseph, your father and your brothers have come to you. So the land of Egypt, it's at your disposal. Settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land, the very best. I think this is the first time in the Bible that word for best is used. So you would think, initial thought is, oh, what a good thing. The bookend of this word, it's also used, I think, in Exodus 20 or 22, when it's talking about when if your animal gets loose and grazes on your neighbor's land, then you got to recompense him by giving the best of your field and grain to your neighbor. So that's a little different. That's a context of like, oh, we did something wrong here. The other time that it is used is 1 Samuel 15, do you remember that story when Samuel defeats the king of Agag? I think it's in this series a lot of people are watching, The House of David. And Agag is defeated, like in episode 1 or something. But it's in 1 Samuel, it's actually in the Bible. And they were supposed to destroy all the possessions, kill all the animals. But Saul decided, we'll let the warriors take some plunder and we'll save the best of the sheep, for sacrifice. And you remember ultimately what Samuel told Saul, man, obedience so much better than sacrifice. So there are some negative connotations biblically associated with this word, and I think that the negative connotations stem from this use, is the children of Israel are getting the best, but is the best really the best? Is it? Is it really God's will long term? So settle your father and your brothers in the best of the land. Let them live in the land of Goshen. And, if you know any capable men among them, put them in rule over my livestock. So again, this is Garden of Eden imagery, big time. Remember what the humans did in the garden? They ruled. They ruled the animals. I mean, Genesis 1, this was like, be fruitful, multiply, and rule. And so this is what the humans did early on. This was, pre-fail, pre-mess. Humans rule. And here they get to rule over all these animals. This is like Noah's Ark deal. So this is what's in our mind, are they returning to the garden or is something else happening here? So he's blessing the Israelites with that Eden-like land. And this is the kind of the centerpiece to the 7 scenes of chapter 46 and 47. Not what we just read, but what we're about to read. What we're about to read in verses 7 through 10 is the central scene in these 7 scenes. So let me read it first. So, and Joseph brought his father Jacob, presented him to Pharaoh. So now Israel himself is face to face with Pharaoh. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is Israel's namesake, the nation of Israel's namesake. And, the one who represents all that is corrupt and evil in the world and across the whole biblical narrative, not necessarily this particular individual. And here they are, the guy with the snake coming out of his hat and the guy who has founded Israel. And it says, Jacob blessed Pharaoh, which is nice and that's also a fulfillment of the Abrahamic promise. Remember? Because Yahweh told Abraham that whoever blesses you, I will bless. So this is right. I mean, Jacob's name means deceiver, so is it real? There's just a question in the mind. It might be genuine, but just keep that question in your mind. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, dude, how old are you? That's kind of what I think that's the sense of this, is like, you old, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my magor, what's that word again, are 130. So if you lived to 130, how would you interpret your life to 130? This is how Jacob interprets it. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life. In comparison, because they haven't attained the years that my fathers lived during the days of their magor, their wandering, So first of all, he's like, I'm a wanderer. I'm an immigrant. I'm a sojourner. I'm out there, no place that's really mine. So even in the land of Canaan, which was promised to his grandfather, he did not see himself as someone who had any kind of possession of the land. And furthermore, he's saying, same thing with my fathers. That would be Isaac and Abraham. Yeah, there were wanderers too. We've just all been wandering. And here we're going to be wandering and immigrating some more. But I find it so interesting. First of all, 130 is not how long he lives. He lives another 17 years. That's number one. Number two, his lens is that 130 is not many, because he's doing a comparative thing. And they've been unpleasant. They've been unpleasant. So the biblical authors are not telling you and I, the reader, that his 130 years were unpleasant. That is not what's happening here. What's happening is the biblical authors are claiming that Jacob thought his 130 years were unpleasant. You see the difference? In his mind, these have been 130 unpleasant years. So let's review his story a little bit. What could have provoked unpleasantness in his life? Constant lying, maybe? Like a lifetime of struggling with other people and with God? Manipulating situations constantly, including the first time at Bethel with God. If you do this, yeah, then I'll follow you. The wrestling match was the real live wrestling match with this supernatural being, which there's theories. I think it's Yahweh himself, but in the flesh. But here, this wrestling match with this supernatural being is supposed to be a microcosm of what he's been doing his whole life. That's why he's renamed Struggles with God, Israel. That's what it means. So at the end of his days, he's like, man, they've been so unpleasant. There's another way that he could have been lensing this. Another way would have been, with all the bad stuff I've done, God's never given up on me. He has been with me. He has been faithful to me. He has loved me through some pretty serious stuff. He gave me the wife of my dreams, and because of family manipulation and other stuff, I personally did all kinds of power plays with these 4 women, and they did power plays on each other and with me, but through all that craziness, I got all these kids, and they're all alive, including the one I thought was dead. I mean, and there was like there's 70 of us coming down into this, and look what's happening. We're getting this land for free from the most powerful person in the world. Few and unpleasant is how he sees this. Okay, I actually want to go to the next section. There's a chiasm here, and that few and unpleasant is the central theme of the chiasm. He's like, I've got a sorrowful life and so far a much shorter life than my dad or my grandpa. It's just something to hold in mind. I think what the Moses team is trying to teach the first readers, Israel, the nation of Israel, is that you can have that outlook if you want. You can look at the life of this nation and say, man, our years have been few and unpleasant compared to our neighbors. But is that really true? Okay. I just think it's a meditative point, like most of the scripture. So here's what Joseph did as a result. Joseph, he settled his father and his brothers and gave them property in the land of Egypt, the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had ordered. Okay, this reference to Ramesses, it's an anachronism. Do you know what that is? Ramesses didn't exist at this time. Ramesses was a much later Pharaoh, not in Joseph's time. But this Ramesses was the founder of a dynasty that was in existence for sure, almost for sure, at the time of Moses' writing of this. So to Moses' audience is like, oh yeah, okay, that we're associating the Ramses figure, who is like the epitome, if you will, of abuse and dictatorship and so forth in their time and in their legends and so forth with this land. It would kind of be like saying, oh, let's say I said, you know, there was a small settlement of believers in Finland in the 1840s, and they went and they settled in the land, they went and settled in Petrograd, which, you know, is in the land of Russia. You know, Putin's land? Well, did Putin exist in the 1840s? No, but it helps you, yeah, dictatorship. You know, I guess, is that controversial for me to say that? Or is everybody, okay. But that's why these anachronisms exist here, because they would make sense to the people reading this for the first time. It's not saying that, you know, that the narrative everybody was thinking about a guy that didn't exist yet. So, okay, in verse 11, how much did the Israelites, I'll call them that, even though they're not called that till later, how much did they have to pay for this land? He gave it to him. It's at his disposal. So Pharaoh said, this is up to you, how you want to handle this. It's at your disposal, all this land. And so what fee does Joseph charge? It's free. I'm giving it to you guys. This is what it says. He gave them property in the land of Egypt. So, not only that, it's not just this land. He provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with food, according to the number of their little ones. How much did they pay for that? Easy accounting. Just gave it to them. So they're given the best land, plenty of food by Joseph, because Pharaoh has told him he could. And this means Joseph is able to leverage his influence and power to extract the wealth of, think of, the Pharaoh power structure. That's what Ramses represents, to the advantage of his own family. All this wealth and power, I wasn't lifted up for nothing. I'm going to bless my family. So to the, first readers of this, it's like, yay. You should. You take care of your family, don't you? And what a blessing. God arranged all this. Well, God arranged things to save lives. We do find that out. But did God arrange things for him to, okay. Maybe Pharaoh said he could. He said, I've got it at your disposal. So I think that the reader is supposed to think there's nothing wrong with this. It's just that it's really generous. It's really generous. We'll keep reading to see how that generosity extends. Verse 13. Now there was no food in all the land. What land are we talking about? Primarily Egypt. You know why? Because the famine was very severe. So that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. So who's suffering? Everybody. The whole region is suffering. So it's just a reminder to the reader that it's not like, Egypt is enjoying the garden life and it was just Canaan where the problems were. It's a reminder. But the garden life is now being given as a gift by Joseph, who's one of the brothers. He's giving his brothers and his father and their families all this land and food. But the people of Egypt are still in this incredible state of scarcity. And who's responsible to take care of that? Joseph. Yeah, He was given, exactly, yeah, he was given the role and responsibility of managing the distribution of all that saved up grain for the 7 years of abundance. So let's see how that goes, shall we? Verse 15. So when the money, literally silver, but it means money, was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan. Oh, do you remember how Joseph handled the distribution from a couple chapters back of the food? People would come and buy grain. And then when they gave Joseph their money, the money would go into the treasury, and then the food would go to the people. Remember that? Well, now the money's gone. They've used up all their money. And there's still no food. So they came saying, all the Egyptians, this is the Egyptians coming to Joseph, say, give us food. Why should we die in your presence? Money's gone. So the first pit that they were in is that they had to pay for food, which, it's okay. You should pay for your food, right? But it's gone. They've used it all up. They've got no way to replenish it because it's a famine. They can't grow crops and sell them and get money. So the money's gone. Savings are gone. 401ks are gone. So what can Joseph do? Remember what he just did with his family. What he did with his family is, I'm going to give you land, I'm going to give you food, everything you want. Of course, there's only 70 of them. There's a lot more Egyptians. So Joseph said, give up your livestock. Then I'll give you food for your livestock, since your money's gone. This is pit number 2. Livestock is wealth in the ancient world. Money is just a convenient means of transacting business. Silver. It's a medium of exchange. But livestock, that's real wealth because it reproduces. You get things from livestock. You can't milk a silver coin, right? I know colloidal silver, and is that controversial? But you can't milk a silver coin. But livestock, that's your legacy, that's your means of recovery. That's your work animals for when the famine's over and you can grow crops again. That's your machinery. It's not everything, but it's really close to everything because you got no money to buy more. And Joseph's like, give me that and I'll give you food. Have you ever seen it in this light before? So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the herds, the donkeys, and he fed them with food. In exchange for all their livestock that year, 1 year. Verse 18. Oh, remember who's in charge of the livestock? The Israelites. Isn't that clever? So again, ancient Israelite readers like, wow, that is so smart, Joseph. You figured out a way. First of all, you've got it to where Pharaoh gives some clever Israelites to be in charge of all of Pharaoh's livestock, and now Pharaoh's got a lot more livestock. Job security. Verse 18. But that was just for 1 year, And when that year ended, they came to him the next year. This is pit number 3. And said to him, all right, we're not going to hide from my Lord the fact that money's spent and livestock are yours. There's nothing left. Except, our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land. So buy us and our land for food. And then we and our land will be slaves to Pharaoh. So, give us seed so that we can live and not die, so that the land may not be desolate. All right, we have something very important that is happening here. We have multiple things that are important. But one of the things that I want you to keep in your mind, especially when you proceed to Exodus, is narratively in the biblical literature what slavery means. It means different things, but slavery in this context. Slavery can mean being a servant in somebody's house and not getting paid and being, owned by somebody. It can be that. But we are being introduced now to a different kind of slavery. This is a slavery where you lose the autonomy over your own property to some kind of king or lord. And because of that, it's not really yours anymore. It's not really yours. The ruler of the land owns all your machinery, your livestock, all your means of subsistence, all your money, all your land, and you know what? You too. Whatever he says, you have no autonomy. And you gave it up completely of your own accord because you didn't want to die. Silly reason. And this is what they're offering Joseph. We'll give you our freedom. We'll give you our land inheritance that's supposed to last through generations. And if you just keep us from dying, you can have it all. We'll be your slaves. We'll be Pharaoh's slaves. So what did Joseph do? Oh, you know what? That's enough, guys. It's now, we've taken quite enough from y'all. We've got all this grain loaded up. It's just sitting there. We've got more than enough to last you through the rest of the family because God showed me in a dream. So, no. Take your animals back. Take your money back, which is what I did to my family when I was kind of deceiving them, testing them. This is just a test. Have all the food that you need. Nope. He, on behalf of Pharaoh, all of Egypt that is not Israelite at any rate, is in this sense a slave. Is that good or is that bad? It's interesting, is what it is. It's interesting. So, the question becomes, at the beginning of Exodus, why is it that when there's a Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph, all the Israelites got enslaved? Where did that come from? Genesis 47. He is creating the circumstances for a visitation of ruin upon future generations. So, remember when I said Joseph might not be the ultimate snake crusher? Because there might be some flaw? Here we go. I really think that's what's going on here, and I think the following verses kind of affirm that. Verse 22. You know whose land he didn't buy? The priests. Are these the priests that serve the Lord? No. The priests of Egypt are the conduits of all these corrupt spiritual beings they call gods. Now they're exempt. The gods of Egypt are exempt from the land buy, and of course their representatives. Why? Because the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they lived off the allotment which Pharaoh gave them. So, there's a justification here. You could tell the people, no, that's different because they actually live off of Pharaoh, so You see, that's why they're exempt. So they didn't sell their land. Did they starve? They got grain too, but they didn't have to pay for it. These are the priests of the fake gods. So Joseph said to the people, in case this is unclear, the Moses team wants it to be very clear in verse 23. And Joseph said to the people, gather, I've got some news for you. Behold, today I have purchased you and your land for Pharaoh. So here is seed for you, grain, and you can sow the land. And at the harvest, you're going to give 20% of it to Pharaoh. And the other 80% shall be your food, and for the seed of your field, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones. In other words, to cover the cost of replenishing, and for your survival, 80%. But the margin, the 20% profit by which you could sell and get money and everything, guess who that belongs to? These are the terms of your slavery. So we don't want the economy to collapse because, you got to have, continuing income. So you can't tax 100%. But we're going to tax you 20. This is double what the Lord asks people to give of the first fruit of their land so that he can bless them. It's oppression. So they said, well, you saved our lives, so let's find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's slaves. In case it wasn't clear what's going on here. And Joseph made it a statute concerning the land of Egypt to this day. What's this day? Earliest it could be is the time of the Exodus of Egypt. That Pharaoh was to have the fifth. Only the land of the priests did not become Pharaoh's. So regular people, families of the earth, are they blessed? Because Israel was blessed, so they should be blessed, right? They're not. They're enslaved. But the priests of the corrupt spiritual beings, they're blessed. Okay. Verse 27. Now Israel lived in the land of Egypt, in Goshen. They acquired property. They were fruitful and multiplied. That's that day 5 blessing. And became very numerous. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt for 17 more years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Remember, his days were few and they were very unpleasant. He lived 17 years, garden life, anything he could want. So the Egyptians lost their property. They lost it, all of it. But on the other hand, the Israelites acquired property. They prospered. The Egyptians became slaves. So the narrative, after, making us face this interesting reality, brings us back to Jacob, the lifelong deceiver. And this is what happens. When the time for Israel to die drew near, he called his son Joseph and said to him, please, if I have found favor in your sight, place your hand under my thigh now. This is an ancient Near East euphemism for loins, private parts. Why? Why would you do that? It's multiple reasons. In the ancient Near East, it was indicative of your future, the seed of the future. It's just symbolic of that. It's like your house, your generations. What your house meant in the ancient Near East was not just, the four walls of the place you built to dwell in, but all your family and the people that would come after you. So it's really crucial. especially for a man, oaths are taken this way. Now, interestingly, in the house of Israel, so far in the narrative, Abraham, and especially in Abraham and Jacob's case, they abused that thigh, didn't they? Abraham abused it with the oppression of Hagar, and he was forgiven. He was forgiven, but he was also told, you need to cut that thing, and this is going to be a sign of the covenant for us forever and ever. My grace to you, even after you did this, but also a reminder, don't do that. Don't do that. That's a big part of what circumcision is all about. It's a reminder of God's forgiveness of a terrible, terrible sin. And in Jacob's case, with his abuse among all these women and all the power plays that were going on with these women and the envies and rivalries that were taking place and so forth, during that wrestling match, when Jacob wouldn't give up, so he prevailed, meaning he's not going to change, what does the angel of the Lord do? He hits him in the inner part of the thigh. Remember, we talked about this. Where's that? Yeah. And interestingly, Rachel was probably pregnant with Benjamin when that wrestling match took place. But after that, no more kids. Walked with a limp for the rest of his life. So, at any rate, all of that is supposed to upload when we think, I know it's a lot, when we think of this thigh oath here. And here's the oath he wants. He's like, please do not bury me in Egypt, but when I lie down with my fathers, carry me out of Egypt, bury me in their burial place. And he said, I'm going to do what you said. And he said, no, swear to me. For some reason, Jacob has a hard time believing other people. I wonder why. So he swore to him. Then Israel bowed at the head of the bed. So his final command is still a wrestling. He wants to be buried in the land that Yahweh already promised the land. But he needs a swearing. I gotta be there. I'm not sure if I can trust that Yahweh is gonna take care of this for me and my descendants. So I need you to swear on my loins, on my thigh, Joseph. A little quote from David Foreman's work, Genesis, a Parsha companion. Ancestral holdings are the deepest type of land ownership described in the Bible. Later, this particular word, achuzah, will be used to characterize Israel's possession of the land of Canaan. But Joseph is providing an achuzah, this deep and profound type of land ownership, to his family in Egypt. This is the land of Goshen. Joseph seems keen to ensure that his family won't be mere sojourners, gar, in Egypt. They will feel like they belong there. It does not seem coincidental that Joseph makes this small adjustment in his family's immigration status immediately after he overhears his father complaining to Pharaoh about living the life of a gar, of a sojourner at the end of his years. Seemingly, Joseph wants to make it better. He doesn't want his father and his family to feel like displaced persons. He wants them to feel at home. So he gives them an achuzah in Egypt. And so it happens. The family of Joseph takes possession of land in Egypt, and over time, they prosper, become numerous there. Now, on the face of it, the family is now secure. They're living near Joseph. Things couldn't be any better. In Joseph's eyes, making his family into landed gentry in Egypt must have seemed like a great privilege. But there is at least one man who understands that there's a dark side to all this. Jacob. The family's destiny lies in Canaan, not Egypt. But how will they ever get there? They came down to Egypt with 70 souls, but as Jacob's nears death years later, there are hundreds of family members. The family's wealthy and privileged. They're landowners. Jacob's grandchildren have grown up there. Egypt is all they know. What will ever make them leave? This is a Jewish scholar, by the way. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so I know every time we learn new things, it opens up new questions, doesn't it? And that's the intent of the scripture. The scriptures, especially the Old Testament, the New Testament as well, the goal is not to end on a crescendo and it's like, okay, now I know everything. It's to provoke new wisdom and meditation, to be a recurring buffet that we return to. And on the 168th time that we read it, say, wait, I never saw that before. And it's just so brilliantly designed in a sophisticated way to provoke that kind of reflection. That's why I'm not just trying to teach facts. Hopefully, it's my prayer, is that I'm helping provoke new ways of thinking on the scripture so that it does feed you for the rest of your life. All right, so if we have any thoughts or reflections here, I'm bringing my water because I'm supposed to be drinking water right now. Is this the... Paul.
It's interesting. When you look at this, it's like God has set up the future. And he's staging Israel as he takes them out of Canaan, keeps them from being scattered among the Canaanites. Because look, Judah married a Canaanite woman, and you see they could have easily scattered all over and never been kept together. Then he sends them down to the garden in Goshen, but he's almost setting them up for a cocoon. He's putting them in the place where he's keeping them from scattering among the Egyptians, and then the persecution will come as they go into slavery, and it'll cause them to become even more in this cocoon where they're going to have to trust each other and God alone. Not the gods of Egypt, but their God Yahweh. Otherwise, they never, like your question there at the end, how will they get out of Egypt?
If you got the good life,
yeah,
why would you ever want to leave it?
Persecution pushed them out. Revival came under pressure, but it was in this cocoon that was so interesting to me as you chew on that.
To retain their national identity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I use the word nation in terms of, because the nations weren't like they are now. Family identity is really what it was.
Interesting.
So one last thing, we've got just a couple minutes of this. One of the questions that I was asked a few weeks ago was the timeline. And I'm going to just take a moment to give you a tiny portion of the big giant debate on when all this happened. The general consensus is that the events of this would have happened somewhere between 2000 BC and 1500 BC. And there's all sorts of arguments that you will read where people will take a particular century or decade and draw their line, and you're a heretic if you don't agree with that. And it's so interesting. But that's the general time frame that people argue about, is between 2000 and 1500. Interestingly, the earliest archaeological evidence that exists for the name Israel is the Merneptah stele, which it's an Egyptian language stele, and it mentions Israel as one of the nations that was destroyed by Pharaoh, which that's how those things work. All the enemies, whether they won or not, they're destroyed by whoever's writing the news, right? Everybody did that back then. And in this case, it dates to about, I don't know how they get it to the year, but about 1208 BC, 1208. And there are some that think that comports, there's an argument again of about 250 years, with the fleeing of, the exodus of Israel from Egypt. It wasn't really fleeing. The exodus, or perhaps just after the exodus, but it's certainly in the time frame in which the world as everyone knew it was ending. which was in the 1200s. There was a giant catastrophe, probably due to multiple factors. Civilization pretty much collapsed. It's known as the Bronze Age collapse. If you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, just Google Bronze Age collapse. And the world as everyone knew it came to an end at that time. And that's about the time of Joshua and the Judges, interestingly. They had a moment in time there as everything was falling apart around them to actually build a society. It's quite interesting. So, Father, we thank you for this day. I want to thank you for the love and patience of these amazing students and those who are watching online. And I pray, Father, that each one of them would be blessed in many, many ways. And I pray, Father, that we would treat those outside our camp with great generosity and grace, Lord. And that through that you would bless our descendants. In Jesus' name, amen.